It's even a pretty color.
Live.
We are live, Senator.
Okay. It's 9 a.m., February 16th, and I'd like to welcome everyone. I am Harold French, Senator from District 7, and today we'll be holding a meeting of the Senate Commerce Committee. Before we get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting that we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chair of the Commerce Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-4 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen live to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to watch live and/or listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube and via phone by following the directions and links provided on the General Court website. We have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. We are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remote-senate@leg.state.newhampshire.us or call 603-271-6931. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during the meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call of attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where they are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Senator Bradley.
Good morning, Jeb Bradley. I am in Wolfboro, my office.
Senator Susie.
Good morning, Donna Susie. I'm in Manchester in my home and I'm alone.
Senator Gannon.
Senator Bill Gannon in Sandown in my home office. My two kids are Zooming and may walk through.
And Senator Kavanaugh.
Hello, Kevin Kavanaugh, in my home in Manchester. I'm in the room alone. My family is in the house though.
And once again, I'm Harold French, Senator District 7, and I'm broadcasting live from Canterbury, New Hampshire. So we're all here and attended, accounted for. We'll open the, start off with opening Senate Bill 66 FN. And I'll be introducing that. So Senator Gannon, take over.
Thank you. Okay, Senator French, please introduce the bill. Thank you.
For the record, my name is Harold French, Senator from District 7. Here to introduce Senate Bill 66 FN. This bill we had before us last year. It's allowing on-premise licensees to transport beverages and wines for delivery to consumers. This creates a whole new license for restaurants, and it allows the home delivery of alcoholic beverages from the restaurant to the consumer with a whole string of attached protocols. And we've seen this bill last year. Everyone's had a chance to look at it. If you have any questions, I'll take whatever you have.
No questions? Okay.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator
Gannon.
French.
Thank you. Cameron,
Okay, the first person on my list is Aidan Moore from the Liquor Commission. Aidan, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Cameron, and good morning, committee members. The commission would like to speak in support of Senate Bill 66. There is a companion effort that's making its way through the House Bill 176. And at the Commerce Committee meeting last week, they introduced, the sponsor introduced an amendment which would essentially mirror Senator French's Senate Bill 66. We've looked through this, and as you recall, excuse me, it was the governor's executive order, emergency order, allowing this to occur during the height of the pandemic. It was Senator French's bill that became the basis of that emergency order. And we've had approximately a year to work through any of the bugs that may have been present to see if we could straighten things out. And according to Chief Mark Armaganian, there have been really no big problems associated with the carrying out of this policy during the pandemic. So we speak in support of Senate Bill 66, and I'd be happy to take any of your questions.
thank you, Mr. Moore. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for testifying today.
Okay, the next person on my list is Brian Moran. Brian, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay,
Go ahead, Brian.
great. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, excellent. Good morning, Chairman French, Vice Chair Gannon, and members of the committee. My name is Brian Moran. I'm Director of Government Affairs for the New England Convenience Store and Energy Marketers Association. We represent convenience store and gasoline retailers, independent transportation fuel distributors, and the businesses which supply them. In New Hampshire, there are almost 600 convenience stores, 655 that sell motor fuels, and we employ over 14,000 people. We appreciate the opportunity to share our concerns opposing SB 66. We appreciate, the efforts that the committee, the legislature in general, and the governor's efforts to, address the economic impacts leveled that the pandemic has caused for all retailers, especially the restaurant and hospitality industry. One of our major concerns imposing this is that these changes lack necessity, as there are over 1,500 retail outlets owned by private businesses in the state where beverages and wine are readily available to consumers. So we see no need to permanently expand the current licensing categories where these products are sold for off-premises consumption, allowing restaurants to sell beverages and wine for off-premises consumption after the state emergency ends gives restaurants an ongoing advantage to off-premise permit holders, which depend on these beer and wine sales for their significant percentage of their revenue. Prior to the pandemic, there was no necessity for these measures. So why should there be one afterward once the state emergency and executive orders are lifted? We did not oppose the governor's executive orders. However, to make these temporary provisions permanent is unwarranted, given that we're on the cusp and hopefully by this summer and fall, widespread statewide vaccinations will occur. And I'm certain we can expect a remarkable return to in-person socialization and patronization of restaurants and other permittees once that occurs. And if that doesn't happen, the emergency declarations are not lifted, then the executive orders will remain in place, allowing uninterrupted relief of these temporary measures. So there'd be no gap in this temporary relief that's now occurring, and there'll be no gap and no pressing need for the committee to act on this. Nexima suggests for the committee to consider the following. Continue to rely on the existing executive orders, as there's no urgency to act. After the executive orders are rescinded, required justification from on-premises permittees for continuation of any measures temporarily authorized in the executive orders. Such an evaluation should quantify what measures worked and what didn't. This evaluation is important, particularly given how post-pandemic retail will continue to evolve. If justification is presented and deemed justified by the committee, we'd also urge a significant decrease in the proposed volumes of alcohol. As proposed, there's almost 30 servings of alcohol are allowed, encompassing 16 12-ounce beverages and 2 bottles of wine. A more reasonable approach would be to reflect replicating the dine-in experience to go, which would, and we would suggest including a 2 beverage per entree maximum, with 1 bottle of wine for every 2 entrees, with a maximum of 6 beverages and 2 bottles of wine per transaction. In closing, we see SB 66 lacks necessity, disadvantages current off-premise permit holders, its utility or benefit is really unknown, and it unintentionally picks or favors winners in evolving retail landscape. And the volume of alcohol are inconsistent with the dine-in experience, and there's no urgency to act. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration of our positions. We hope that the committee does not pass this amendment. And if you have any questions, be happy to stay on the line and address them.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moran. So last year when we heard this, I did not realize till the testimony last time that C-stores and grocery stores already, they have the ability for home delivery also. That's true, correct?
Correct.
So, and that's an unlimited amount of delivery. From what I understand, that you could deliver 50 cases of beer to a home if it was ordered. Right?
Yes, correct.
So would the price from your convenience store be less than the price from a restaurant?
In terms of, like, for example?
Well, there wouldn't be rooms and meals tax on it, right?
Correct.
So if a consumer wanted to buy, continue to buy from a C-store, it would be less expensive for them and they could have it delivered.
That is true.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman.
Cameron?
Okay, the next person on the list is Jamie Burnett. Jamie, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jamie Burnett. I'm here representing the Wine Institute today. The Wine Institute represents over 1,000 California wineries and affiliated businesses. We appreciate the opportunity, and I'll be brief. The Wine Institute wholeheartedly supports SB 66 that would allow the delivery and transport of wine and beer to consumers. The legislation, we believe, is very timely and essential for New Hampshire restaurants, which, as we all know, are struggling from the economic fallout of COVID-19 and would provide a much needed benefit for these establishments and their customers. Wineries have also been hit very hard by the loss of sales due to the pandemic and the limited business at restaurants and bars. The revenue losses for really thousands of wineries across the country due to COVID-19 could perhaps reach into the billions in 2020 alone. And while direct-to-consumer wine shipment has increased during the pandemic and wine sales at off-premises licensees have remained steady, the impact on sales at restaurants, bars, and other on-premises licensees doesn't even come close to compensating the loss of wine sales by restaurants and bars. I just wanted to also briefly point out that many states have addressed similar legislation. Today, Ohio, Iowa, Washington, D.C., and Oklahoma have made cocktails to go privileges permanent under the law. Several states have legislation pending that would grant the same authority or privilege that you are considering today, including Rhode Island, Maine, and Connecticut. And other states have granted this on a temporary basis, including Massachusetts, California, New York, Louisiana, Nebraska, Nevada, and Texas, to name a few. So there is precedent for this. It is happening. States are considering it. Other states are considering it now. And the Wine Institute just believes that this is going to be a benefit to businesses right now that have had a very tough year. And it's something that we support. We look forward to working with the committee, and we urge passage. We've also submitted written testimony, so you should have that in your packets. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Karen?
Okay, the next person on my list is Mike Summers. Mike, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mike Summers. I'm the president and CEO of the New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association. I'm not sure if you recall, but back in late 2019, we had worked collaboratively with the Liquor Commission, a number of other stakeholders, and had approached Senator French about filing SB 512 in the last session. Obviously, the pandemic then suddenly derailed all of those plans. The governor was kind enough to essentially take that language and make it into an executive order, which has allowed the industry to sell for takeout and delivery beer and wine. It has not been a huge piece of business for the industry, but it has been an important piece of the business for those businesses that have taken advantage of it. So we certainly are in support of this bill. We'd encourage that you support and pass this bill. Again, a number of comments made prior to me about how devastated the industry had been. I can't understate how important the legislature's support on this will be. One of the comments I did want to respond to is that there was no need to make this a permanent change. And one thing I would leave you with is I think that the industry right now is wrestling with what is going to be our new normal. And it is not clear to me and not clear to many in the industry whether or not folks will come back to dining in at the same rates that they did before the pandemic. And clearly there's going to be a very long tail on this. And so, frankly, I think the industry suspects that there will be a much higher rate of takeout and delivery becoming a permanent activity for folks and for families, more so than dining in at the levels that they have in the past. So we would encourage passage of this. We think it's going to be an important component of the industry, not only surviving the tail end of this pandemic, but then attempting to recover as we come out of this. So I would certainly urge passage. I thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, the last person that I have signed up to speak is Kate Fry. Kate, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Kate Fry. I'm the Vice President of Advocacy at New Futures, and we oppose Senate Bill 66, which allows on-premise license to transport beer and wine. We understand all of the arguments that we have heard. While this is necessary, we did not oppose the executive order. We agree that the executive order should play out, and then we should reevaluate at this point. I think we have to understand that we are in the middle of a pandemic, as we've heard, but we've also have to understand the many disadvantages that have come out of making alcohol more accessible. There was a story in the Union Leader today about how sales are up, and we're not necessarily seeing any of that revenue increase for the increased needs that we're going to see as well. We are seeing increased rates of drinking at this time period as well, and it affects certain groups more than others. And we're seeing that among health disparities as well. A couple things I want to just note about this is that I'd love to see some data of how many restaurants have really taken advantage of this and what the impact has been. I would love to see some data going forward. We hear that this might be the new normal. Can we get a better understanding of what that's going to look like? Will the Liquor Commission be collecting that data? I will acknowledge while this bill, we oppose this bill, it is a better version of what was in the House Bill 176, which would also have allowed cocktails to go. That we will continue to oppose. That's a very, very slippery slope with cocktails to go. So we do acknowledge that at least this bill does not have that. Again, we would would like to see what data is going to be collected around this. And again, the executive order is in place. We don't see the need for this legislation at this point in time. Thank you very much. We have sent you testimony and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Fry. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for appearing.
Senator French, that is everyone I have who signed up to speak. Aidan Moore has his hand raised, speak for a second time, and Senator Kavanaugh also has his hand raised.
Senator.
Thank you, Senator French. I did want to add this too. I have an amendment that I wanted to offer. I think Aaron sent around to the committee. It's 2021-0357S. I mean, timing's everything, I guess, but it does add liquors to the delivery part of this. And this was something that was presented to me in the fall. There was a restaurant owner that we're seeing the spike of the infections of the pandemic, worried about another shutdown. And the restaurant owner I had a conversation with said that with the expanded seating outside, they could do okay with the takeouts. But if they shut down again with winter coming in, they were fearful of just losing everything. This business has been in business for over 20 years. So it was at that request to what they said, if they can add that with takeout dinners to beer, wine, and liquors, that it would help them. So that I can wait to present the amendment, or if you want to at exec session, I don't know if we're doing that today, but at least put it out there so people can see. It's the amendment 0357S.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aidan Moore has his hand raised, speak for a second time, Senator French.
Yeah, please.
Okay, Aidan, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just thought I would take a moment to distinguish the current bill, Senate Bill 66, and just to bring to the committee's attention that moving forward, unlike the pandemic where any of the on-premise licensees had the ability to achieve home delivery, moving forward under Senate Bill 66, they would need to make an application for this permit and pay $250 to achieve this permitting process. So some businesses are going to choose not to do it. They've had a year to work through the governor's emergency order and determine whether or not this is something they wish to continue. And for those who do wish to continue it, they would need to pay that fee and become licensed. And I think as a part of that, that would create the data that Ms. Fry is seeking to determine how many businesses are doing it. And we would have an ability to track that moving forward. So I just thought I'd offer that to the committee in response to some of the information that was provided. Thank you. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Did you happen to hear Senator Kavanaugh's upcoming amendment to allow cocktails to be delivered also from restaurants?
Yes, sir. I did hear that. I haven't seen the amendment, and I think the commission would certainly want to review the amendment to determine whether or not we wish to continue to support Senate Bill 66 if it were amended.
Great. Could you take a look at that and get back to us?
Yes, sir. And Senator Kavanaugh, you said that was Amendment 0357S. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience?
I have
Wishing to speak?
Andy Day raising his hand to speak for the first time.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning, everybody. I appreciate you being here today. I'll be brief. I own Cask and Vine, a restaurant in downtown Derry. We're actually just speaking with the union leader and in the union leader about our struggles over the course of this winter. I can tell you that as soon as this emergency relief that allowed us to sell wine and beer to go came through, that was tremendous for us. We're a small place and we rely on people sitting in seats. So to dig into our cellar of both beer and wine for to-go orders has been amazing. And I think as someone who actually previously owned 2 convenience stores, Senator French, you had mentioned the cost difference between purchasing from a retail outlet versus a restaurant. We pay more for wine from the Liquor Commission as a restaurant than an off-premise convenience store or grocery store pays. So there's a significant difference there. This, I think, is more about going forward. It allows restaurants to make a little bit of extra money, and it's a convenience factor. There's going to be some people that don't care that they're going to have to pay 20 to 30% more for a bottle of wine to go if they can just order their food and their wine at the same place. And there will be people that, as was previously stated, you can deliver as a convenience store or a grocery store beer and wine. So if you'd prefer to order your food from one restaurant and then order your beer and wine from a convenience store, you have those options. And I think having more options for the consumer is better. That's my piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Anyone else, Cameron?
Let's see. Raising his hand to speak first time. I have Jeff Cozens. Jeff, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, Cameron, Mr. Chairman, good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Good
My
morning.
name is Jeff Cousins. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Schilling Beer Company up in Littleton. And I'm also the president of the New Hampshire Brewers Association. I'd like to voice our support for this bill. We agree with Mr. Day. Consumer choice is extremely important. And this gives restaurants the opportunity to really add into that revenue stream, especially during the pandemic. This is a crucial piece for them. We support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and then the last hand I have to speak for a second time, Kate Fry. Kate, you should be able to raise your hand or unmute yourself rather.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. I do want to acknowledge thanks to the Liquor Commission for the clarification of collecting the data. That will be important. I would like to ask a question about amendments. This amendment has not been circulated. Will there be an opportunity to speak to it? As I said in my testimony, not knowing this was coming, I just brushed on it, but there are huge issues with cocktails to go that we're seeing in other states. As far as we have to remember, it's an increased percentage in alcohol, but also the packaging of these. And, is it in a cup with a straw? Is it in something that's much more sealed? I think if the committee were to look at this amendment, we should have an opportunity, those stakeholders, to weigh into this much more than just a passing amendment to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and then I've had one more hand here speaking for the first time, Jim Alden. Jim, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Jim Alden, and my wife and I own Chudder's Candy Stores in Lincoln, Loon Mountain, Bretton Woods, and also the World Record up in Littleton, New Hampshire. I'm also president of Littleton Main Street, which is our destination marketing organization, charged with attracting people to not just Littleton, but to our overall area. I was fortunate enough to serve on the Governor's Commission recently on craft beer, distilling, and winery, and learned an awful lot about all that process and the extent to which they're encumbered by a lot of these laws and the opportunities they have to achieve parity with our neighboring states. I've also spent time on the Governor's Council on Tourism and Travel, and know that how important it is for us to be able to attract people to New Hampshire to drive all of our tourist-based businesses, which is the second largest industry in the state. And the extent to which our laws are more encumbered, our businesses are more encumbered by these laws, impacts our attractiveness as a destination. And we are not necessarily, I always say that I'm not competing against Candy Store A, Candy Store B, Candy Store C. I believe that we're competing against Cape Cod, the coast of Maine, Portland, Burlington, the Berkshires. And to the extent that we don't have parity in these laws with these other states, makes us overall less competitive and impacts all of the industries that rely on tourism. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Cameron?
Senator, that is everyone who has raised their hands and who signed up.
Great, then I'm going to close this hearing on Senate Bill 66 FN. And we will open hearing on Senate Bill 125 FN. Senator Gannon.
Senator French, thank you very much. The last speaker spoke of unencumbered, and that's really what 125, SB 125 is all about. So I am submitting that today with Amendment 2021-0358. So I never appreciated Senator French and Senator Bradley when you guys had all these beer bills, and I didn't realize how much it meant to the state. So just the craft beer industry is $506 million and growing. It provides 4,700 jobs, and those jobs average $42,000 per employee. So mea culpa, I didn't realize how much good you guys were doing for the state every time you brought up a beer bill. So what 125 does is simplification. When you go, it removes food requirements and makes it clear what food is, as opposed to just chips. If you like, you need a little bit more substantive product to count as food. It makes it easier. You guys always confused me on the floor. You were talking microbreweries, nanobreweries. I never appreciated it till I looked into the industry a little more. And this makes it really clear and easy for people like me who are a little more novice. It's a volume-based manufacturer structure, and it makes enforcement and access to the market much easier. This bill allows, you can have one additional retail location, and that won't have a full brew pub attached to it. So you could have your main brewery and one place more. And it also clarifies direct shipping and contract brewery language. And I think it's good for the state. Again, as the last speaker said, the more we can unencumber, make it easier for our businesses to work, the better it will be. And I saw all upsides to SB 125. I thank you. I can answer basic questions, and there are people more knowledgeable about the industry than myself who are available after me.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions? Great, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, first is Aidan Moore from the Liquor Commission. Aidan, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Cameron. Good morning, committee members. My name is Aidan Moore. I'm the legal coordinator for the State Liquor Commission. And we believe we know what the amendment is that was introduced by Senator Gannon. But we would like to tell you that we think this bill has significant challenges that we have yet to work through. Some of these changes are relatively minor, but others contained in the proposal would be fundamental changes in the system, and also proposed without consideration to the other tiers, manufacturers in this tier, wine and liquor. One of the most significant pieces is the repeal of RSA 178-12A, which repeals the statute for nanobrewers. And this bill would affect every beverage manufacturer in the state, including Anheuser-Busch, which is going to be impacted by some of these changes as well. We're not opposed to the amendment as drafted, and we're not deeming it unworthy of consideration, but certainly the changes that are being proposed will have a significant impact on New Hampshire's alcoholic beverage system. and they're a little uncertain at the time, and we would recommend that they not be rushed into. We have looked at what we believe is the amendment and identified three changes that we think could be accomplished to help this industry in its efforts to expand and provide additional services to New Hampshire citizens as well as visitors. Many of the changes that are proposed are made without the assistance or contribution of the Liquor Commission. And while the Commission's involvement is certainly not a prerequisite to alcohol-related legislation, the Commission has the experience, the expertise, and historical background to evaluate proposals and offer the Senate and House the benefit of our regulators' knowledges. So we would propose that the larger policy pieces of this be moved off for further study. And we can certainly offer to you those three areas that we think can be accomplished fairly easily with, it certainly would require legislation, but we think we can identify those quickly for you. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Moore.
Okay, the next person is Scott Shire. Scott, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hey, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Scott.
Good morning, Chairman French and honorable members of the Commerce Committee. My name is Scott Shire. I work in the New Hampshire beer industry and I work for the New Hampshire Beer Distributors Association. I appreciate the time to speak with you today on this legislation from our brewer partners in the state. And as wholesalers in the middle tier, if you remember, this three-tier system is comprised of manufacturers in the first tier, wholesalers or distributors in the middle tier, and then retailers like restaurants and grocery stores and convenience stores in the third tier. We really appreciate being able to work hand in hand with our partners to help them grow this business, grow the business, especially in light of the pandemic. I think it's been a real challenge for our partners in hospitality, specifically those operating on-premise outlets, restaurants, brew pubs, breweries with restaurant licenses, et cetera. And in many cases, we were able to sort of help, this middle tier was able to help expand opportunities to getting to new consumers and new outlets throughout the pandemic, which actually allowed many of these New Hampshire breweries to grow their volume in 2020. In general, I think we were fortunate to see beer volume up almost 5% during 2020, which was a real challenging year. The regulatory system here in New Hampshire has effectively protected citizens and provided a really good structure for safety and created massive consumer choice, value and protection, and enabling competition for craft breweries of all sizes to thrive. Unlike other industries like potato chips or soda, if you walk into your local Hannaford or Market Basket, you'll see that they tend to, one or two big brands tend to dominate, and then there's a very small section of maybe local brands. That's just the opposite here in New Hampshire. If you walk into a Market Basket or a Shaw's and you look at the aisle, you're going to see all of our favorite New Hampshire breweries right up there with imported brands from around the world and around the country. So I think we're generally very supportive of all these efforts. We did get a look at the copy of the amended language late last week. And I think one thing that really concerns us is the satellite retail locations without any production, because that's a direct violation of the three-tier system and would start to break it down, which could ultimately lead to constitutional challenges from larger out-of-state suppliers on interstate commerce grounds and potentially lead to deregulation, which I think is a very risky proposition. And considering everything that's been happening this year and how the results are actually pretty good, I think that's a huge risk to take. We do support other parts of this bill, but like I said, this part was kind of a surprise we just learned about and presents a threat to the system that served so many so well over the years and should probably be removed from the bill. It's unnecessary as sales continue to grow, and it offers sort of a precedent going forward that could potentially unleash some unintended consequences for many people for decades in the future. I think we're better off focusing on issues that will help us all, like hospitality recovery efforts, streamlining reporting and filing procedures, and fully funding New Hampshire tourism budgets, which I think ultimately is going to help us all in the beer industry. And I'll leave it at that. We're neutral on the bill, but concerned about that part of the amendment with the satellite locations. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay, the next person I have is Andy Day. Andy, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning again, Senators. Thank you again for being here. As I had mentioned earlier, I am the owner of Cask and Vine, a restaurant in downtown Derry, along with being the owner of Daydreaming Brewing Company, Dware Distilling, and most recently Meadow Vineyards. So in short, I'd like to say that I can kind of see things from all sorts of points of view: restaurant owner, brewer, distiller, and winemaker. I am in favor of SB 125 for the reasons that are simply stated in the amendments. It allows us to compete with the surrounding states. And even better for people like me, it allows for collaboration between wineries and breweries. This has actually been able to happen in a limited fashion with satellite tasting rooms. And it's actually been beneficial to both wineries and breweries to be able to pour at each other's places. This actually just happened this past weekend with Rockingham Brewing Company and Apollo Vineyards. It's exposure for everybody, and it's more choices. We just opened this winery, just actually haven't even officially opened, but it's our intention to open a satellite location, which is something that wineries have been able to do for a while. Having that same ability with my brewery would give me the ability to provide more choices and grow my business. So again, I see this as a benefit for the customer and for business owner. Thank you.
Any questions? See up, Senator Gannett has a question.
Thank you, Senator French. So would this give, we'll say someone like up north, an opportunity to come down to, say, there's a new plaza going in Salem. It's going to have high-end stores, and it's supposed to be a destination location. Do you see that having satellites where you just had a location would be a huge asset to someone in the north?
I do. Absolutely. Yes. You actually see this. LaBelle has a satellite location right now. I know that Moonlight Meadery had at the very least looked at having a satellite location. Another piece that I think is important is that we have 4 breweries in the town of Derry, including my brewery. We also have 2 wineries. Actually, yes, we have 2 wineries and a distillery. And this becomes a hotspot for travelers, both in-state and out of state. It's a destination. So if there was another winery that decided that they wanted to open up a satellite tasting room in Derry, as a business owner, as a restaurant owner, I would want to see that, because it's that many more reasons for people to come to my town. So it's tremendously beneficial.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Day.
Thank you.
Cameron?
The next person I have is Mike Apollo. Mike, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
I'm Mike Apollo. I am the owner. Thank you for hearing me. I'm the owner and winemaker at Apollo Vineyards in Derry, and I rise in support of this bill. As I see this is mostly a parity law with respect to the change that allowed wineries to sell by the glass and actually have remote tasting rooms. I testified for those legislations several years ago. One of the objections to the wine bill was the fact that breweries should have the same rights, and I agree. My experience is immediately that when the wine law was put into effect, allowing us to sell glasses of wine at the winery, sales increased. The ability of customers to sit with the owners, enjoy a drink, learn more about the business, know more about the products they're consuming went up. And so we call that customer engagement. Customers are engaged with these businesses. And my winery, immediately after the Wines by the Glass Window Project, sales increased. And this was the single greatest revenue increase in the past few years. It is still a very significant part of my business. And to the effect of between food and wine sales, it's about 30% of, 30% by the glass and food sales versus 70% just selling bottles to go, like a normal winery would do. This has the effect of much more meals revenue to the state, meals tax revenue. And the volumetric effect, selling more wine or beer in this case, also has a result tax on the alcohol increases. In other words, if we sell more volume, the tax on that volume that we sell, or in the case of a winery, the 5% that we pay as tax increases, so that the state makes more money. And that completely negates the effect of any kind of decreased licensing revenue that might be effect of this bill. I also spoke in support of the remote winery tasting rooms. And again, this is just another parity issue. While I don't currently have one of these remote tasting rooms, I can see a future where I need to move my production space away from my winery tasting room when I outgrow it. Currently, they have to be co-located, and this allows for different business models to take place where if you're known in one place, you don't have to move that place in order to increase production. I also have one of the few sampling licenses, like Andy mentioned. That allows me to sample my wine at nano breweries. And we often work with Rockingham Brewing, leveraging each other's strengths and customer cycles. Winery and breweries are kind of off cycle from one another. And what that helps us do is in the summer, wineries are really hot. In the winter, breweries are really hot. If we can sample at each other's locations, it evens out our business a little bit. Just to correct Andy a little bit, Derry will still have soon have four wineries: Apollo, Birchwood, Meadow, and then LaBelle is moving a new facility here. And in closing, at the end of the day, all license holders are held to standard not to overserve customers, which is one of the greatest resistance factors in any of these kind of bills, and putting the changes that effect. So we're responsible regardless of what we do. We can't overserve customers, and believe me, I've asked people to leave when they got here because they weren't ready to be served.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Paulo. Cameron?
Okay, up next is Kate Fry. Kate?
Good morning again, members of the committee. My name is Kate Fry from New Futures. My testimony is obviously going to be a repeat of what you've heard often on these bills. Again, this is a deviation from the three-tier system, which we have of regulations in place for reasons for public safety. We will continue opposing bills that increase accessibility without revenue for the unintended consequences. I did want to just say too that I have heard that there's amendment on this one as well too. We have not seen the amendment. It's hard to speak to things when you don't have that in front of you. Our main concern to the bill is the additional satellite locations, because it's an increased locations for alcohol outlets, but also we're very concerned about what this bill is maybe trying to do with taking away service of food, but it's very difficult to be able to speak to it without the amendment. So I would encourage the distribution of the amendment and an opportunity to speak to that as well. And thank you very much for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Kate. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Cameron?
Okay, next is Brian Moran. Brian, you should be able to unmute yourself. Brian?
Oh, can you hear me?
Now we can.
There we go. Thank you. I'll be brief. Our concerns echo the last speakers as well, in terms of not being able to see the amendment and have before us, and would certainly like an opportunity to expand on our comments. And they focus primarily on, kind of deviating and blurring the license categories and permits for the three-tiered system, and would like to give greater consideration to that and better understanding. And specifically for us, for convenience stores, it's chipping away at our opportunities, which we rely on for sales of beverages and wine, and we're concerned about that. And I don't want to overstate, but also our convenience stores, although we were deemed essential and allowed to remain open, our sales are still not where they were before, particularly as it relates to motor fuels as well. So we're doing okay, but we're not great. So that's our position on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Moran.
Okay, the next person I have is Henry Veyer. Henry, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator French and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Henry Veyu, and I'm here this morning to speak on behalf of the New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association. The Lodging and Restaurant Association has concerns with Senate Bill 125. I've not seen the amendment, but as you're probably aware, with any of these liquor issues, because of the three-tier system, anytime you change the lanes of where people can drive in this system, you can potentially benefit one of the stakeholders and negatively impact some of the other stakeholders. And from the restaurant side, I think this bill would hurt restaurants. And I'll bring up a particular issue, and that is the change that would allow for the unlimited serving of quantities of beer with very little food requirement. Restaurants have a very strong food requirement. You basically got to have a full-size kitchen, which has quite a bit of cost. If you look at the beverage manufacturer requirement, you can have just a third party bring in some food. So essentially going to be creating what I call like bars, like a real bar where there's very little requirement for service of food, and you can serve as much beverage as you want. If the state of New Hampshire is going to move to that model, we would like to revisit the restaurant license to provide a similar opportunity. Because if you're going to allow for the beverage manufacturers, again, which are in a different tier, to become more like restaurants or bars, create a bar, then we think that there should be an opportunity for the restaurants to create a bar and compete on the same level. So anytime you have, again, where you're changing the lanes of where people can drive, I think there should be a broader discussion with all the different stakeholders. I know the restaurants are concerned about this. Maybe there's a way that both sides can move forward. But again, if we're going to create bars, then let's have a broader discussion and allow the restaurants to create bars. For that, I think it might be worth retaining this bill. I know none of us have seen the amendment, and we do have a short period of time. I don't know how soon you have to get this bill out, but we would just urge slowing the train down a little bit. I know the commission expressed some concern that they hadn't really been consulted. So I think the best path forward might be to retain the bill. And that's it. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you, Henry.
Okay, the next person on my list is Jeff Cousins. Jeff, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Cameron, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members of the committee, I'm going to rise today and speak in support of Senate Bill 125 with the corresponding amendment. My testimony is going to vary greatly from what you've heard. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Schilling Beer Company, which is a brewery that I started with my family in Littleton back in 2013 after leaving my first career as a senior counterterrorism advisor to the US government. I was elected president of the New Hampshire Brewers Association in 2020. And today I'm speaking on behalf of approximately 80 of the 90 independent craft breweries in New Hampshire, the vast majority of them small family-owned businesses, very much like mine, that really epitomize the American dream. The impact of these small breweries from Nashua all the way to Coldbrook has been tremendous, as Senator Gannon mentioned. They've grown from 17 when I started my business back in 2013 to over 90 today. The senator mentioned the economic impact in 2019 being north of 500 million. He talked about the jobs, but perhaps even more importantly, New Hampshire now ranks in the top 10 nationally in terms of breweries per capita. And that's a statistic that speaks to the importance of New Hampshire breweries within the state's communities. Beyond the numbers though, craft breweries function very uniquely within the state's new economy. They straddle multiple economic sectors, including outdoor recreation, emerging technology, and Main Street artisanship. They share so many similar consumer demographics and preferences, and their impact on destination tourism and vitality is very literally transforming dozens of towns in the state. Even if you look up in the North Country where we are, you'll find that craft breweries are helping communities get younger and more attractive to tourists, to entrepreneurs, and to those looking even to relocate in the state. And we see Littleton as being a prime example of this. We argue that craft breweries should be at the very heart of what the state should be protecting and promoting to boost its post-COVID economy. But what makes all the above more impressive to me, at least, is that for far too long, complex regulations have shackled New Hampshire's breweries. This has made them very generally less attractive to customers than breweries in Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say that these states have been eating our industry's lunch because of overregulation. Every craft brewer that I know in New England shares this perspective. And frankly, that's why my brewery was almost started in Vermont back in 2013. I would argue that holding back an industry this vital is not the New Hampshire way. And that's why SB 125 and the amendment are so important. It proposes the simplification of, not removal of, food requirements for pint service at breweries. Pouring pints into customers' glasses is the most lucrative exchange in the brewery business. And Maine, Massachusetts, and Vermont have far fewer regulations governing this practice than we do. The bill brings our industry into parity with our neighbors. And that makes the signature experience of visiting New Hampshire breweries even more appealing. The bill also streamlines brewery license types by removing the confusing nano brewery designation and introducing a 4-tiered volume-based structure. No longer will brewery practices and privileges be lost or gained by expansion. The bill also allows every brewery in the state to maintain one additional retail storefront per license, minus a full brewery, as is done in neighboring states. And now this is just enormous for rural breweries in our state, including those up in the North Country where I'm from, because it would permit them to open up a storefront in a place like Portsmouth or Manchester or Concord at a fraction of the cost that it actually took them to open their breweries. I mean, by example, when my business expanded, we spent 7 figures on our brew house to enable us the privilege of making the liquid by which we earn our livelihood. Now imagine if just 5 breweries did this. Our math shows a tax revenue increase of $128,000 over a 12-month period. Finally, SB 125 and the amendment rectify laws governing both direct shipping within the state and contract brewing as well, ensuring that all New Hampshire breweries can participate in these revenue streams, which are even more critical during the COVID period. The bill and its amendment allow New Hampshire breweries to run alongside, not behind, those in surrounding states. And this isn't just about beer. It's about supporting our businesses, our families, and our communities through responsible deregulation, simplification, and expanded consumer choice. That, I would argue, is the New Hampshire way. And I would also say a strategic approach to the future. I very much appreciate your time today. I look forward to speaking with you if you have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Cousins. Cameron?
The next person I have is Rob North. Rob, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for allowing me to speak today on Senate Bill 125. My name is Robert North. My wife and I founded Great North Ale Works in 2011, and by 2015, we were proudly brewing beer in Manchester. Like Jeff mentioned, we and most of the other members of the Brewing Association are family-owned businesses. So Senate Bill 125 is very, very important to us in terms of providing parity amongst other states. But I did want to take a moment to talk specifically about contract brewing, which is an element that is very, very important to our business and also to the business or to other businesses that we serve. We have been contract brewing for several years now, working with small businesses in New Hampshire which lack the capacity or equipment to satisfy the demand for their products. We've worked with all types of brewery license holders, nanobreweries, beverage manufacturers, and brew pubs. In late 2020, we had negotiated agreements with 2 New Hampshire brew pubs to enter into contract brewing arrangements. However, these arrangements were rejected by the Liquor Commission, basically citing that brew pubs do not have the approval to enter into contract brewing relationships. Senate Bill 125 rectifies that, which we feel is particularly important during this time of pandemic. We really do need to be giving all the help possible to on-premise licensees such as brew pubs. Senate Bill 125 also, in terms of restructuring and simplifying the license types for nanobreweries, enshrines our ability to contract brew for other small New Hampshire-based breweries. With that, I thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. North. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Cameron?
The next person on my list is Andrew Drummond. However, I don't see Andrew here. Andrew, if you're here, if you could raise your hand. If you're on the phone, press *9. I'm not seeing any movement there. So the next person on my list is Jeff Seavey. Let's see here. Okay, I am also not seeing Jeff. The next person after that is Pam Taxera. Let's look here. Okay, I'm also not seeing Pam. And so then the last person I have who signed up to speak is Heather Tower. Okay, I'm also not seeing Heather, so we do have a few hands raised, and I'll go to them, Senator French.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Errol Moe. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you for giving us the opportunity to present. I am speaking on behalf of Stoneface Brewing Company, which was started in Newington, New Hampshire, about just over 7 years ago with some friends. And as one of the larger breweries in the state, we do work through the 3-tier system. We have wholesaler partners that are extremely helpful and valuable to our relationships with retailers locally and across the state. So first, I want to kind of speak to the importance of parity with our customers as they come in through the state. Right now, Jeff mentioned this, and Senator Gannon spoke eloquently about the impact that these breweries have on the state and their communities. I can't understate the importance of getting people in through the state, through our doors, in order to have a better customer experience and directly interact with them. The reason that that part of this bill especially is so important to reach parity with additional states is because right now New Hampshire can be seen as a bit of a flyover on the way to neighboring states when it comes to brewery visitation and tourism. This bill takes care of some of those challenges that we've faced over the years. Stoneface, especially being operated for this amount of time, has seen small changes in some of these laws, such as when we started, we were forced to give free flights, free samples to our customers. And as we've seen over time, we were able to start selling them. Then we were able to start offering pints as we offered food. What this has done, though, is force a lot of people like me, like Mr. Cousins, into restaurant ownership, which is not necessarily our intent. We wanted to develop community-based breweries where people can come and enjoy themselves, sit down, talk to the owners. So this addresses that really specifically, and it's overdue in our opinion. Lastly, I want to speak about the retail outlets and the marketing opportunity that represents, because I understand that it may be some confusion because unfortunately that amendment the full language of the amendment didn't get in front of everybody. That opportunity that we have to interact with customers outside of our four walls is going to be increasingly important as consumer preferences shift toward brewery visitation and getting that pint slid across the table and being able to interact with people who work at the brewery. So it's certainly much less about competition than it is about meeting customer expectations. So I want to make sure that doesn't get lost on the committee. I thank you for the opportunity to share our testimony, and I will be on the line if there are any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Moe.
Okay, the next hand I have raised is CJ Haynes. CJ, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am CJ Haynes, and I'm the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Brewers Association. So I have collectively worked with over 80 breweries on this bill specifically. I did want to specify that I understand that the amendment, not everyone has had the opportunity to see it yet, but I do want to stress that one of the main components of the amendment addresses the food component, which means that there still is limitations for food, meaning that it cannot be more service than 2 pints without food. It still requires food. We're only suggesting that smaller breweries have the right to serve up to 2 pints without food. And then should they choose to offer more than 2 pints to any individual, that they have to seek food. And we're also suggesting that the option be that there is third-party food available, which will help promote food truck industry in the state, as well as other restaurants in the state, by making a collaborative effort with nearby restaurants to offer food for service. Additionally, I am happy to answer any of the questions that anyone has, but I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Haynes.
Okay, and then Senator French, the last hand I have raised is Jim Alden. Jim, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to reiterate my comments on the previous bill that as Senator Gannon pointed out, that the extent to which our breweries are encumbered by these laws that our other states do not have to deal with puts us at a competitive disadvantage. And really what this bill is looking for is parity with our surrounding states. And for New Hampshire to be less competitive because of this patchwork, sort of labyrinthine, archaic set of laws governing the craft brewing industry, that for us to be less competitive than any of our neighboring states is anathema to the spirit of New Hampshire. So I fully support this and ask for it to go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else, Cameron?
I have a couple of hands looking to speak for a second time. We have Aiden Moore, Andy Day, and Jeff Cousins looking to speak for a second time.
I'd like to hear from Mr. Moore to start with.
Okay, Aiden, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Mr. Moore?
Aiden, are you there? Oh. Aiden, are you there? It looks like you're unmuted on our end.
No, go ahead. Next.
Okay, yep. Okay, next we have Andy Day. Andy, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just wanted to address one of Henry's comments earlier about breweries becoming bars. And I am a restaurant owner. So while I don't speak for all restaurants, I think it's important to say that as a restaurant owner with 4 breweries and 4 wineries, I do still support this bill. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the Restaurant Association was in support of SB 66, which allows restaurants to sell beer and wine to go. Restaurants do currently have the ability to provide unlimited pours. This, for me, is like you can't have your cake and eat it too. I did speak earlier about collaborations between wineries and breweries. And as CJ mentioned, this is the same for restaurants. We have a lot of restaurants in the area in my town, as well as bakeries and food trucks that go to breweries, and they are the food service. So I feel like that's an opportunity to raise awareness and parity with other states. I think it's the right thing to do.
Thank you.
Okay, and Jeff Cousins, you should be able to unmute yourself again, Jeff.
Yes, thank you very much, Cameron. Mr. Chairman, I'll be very brief. I wanted to make the committee aware of the fact that this bill and its amendment is really unanimously endorsed by roughly 80 of the state's craft breweries. There are approximately 90. That's how many our association represents. So this is not something that simply a segment of the industry is interested in. We've talked about competitive balance with our neighbors. We've talked about parity, but I want to be very clear. This is not about the creation of bars. We are not advocating unlimited beer service without food. There are clearly state laws that govern over service. That's never been what the New Hampshire craft brewing community is about. We're about raising communities, we're about family businesses, and we're about preparing the state to enter into the future of a very new economy. And so craft breweries should be at the centerpiece of that. And we look forward to collaborating with all native New Hampshire beverage manufacturers as well as we embrace that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, let's give Aiden Moore one more chance here and see if we can unmute him. He's our last hand.
Cameron, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members. Excuse me, as I said in my opening remarks on behalf of the commission does feel that this bill has a number of complexities which have to be worked out and not rushed through, but we have found what we believe are to be 3 distinct changes that we can work with you and the committee to try to implement quickly. The first is a provision that seeks to remove the limitation on the sales that can be made at a beverage manufacturer's facility. Currently, the sales are limited to a single 15.5 gallon keg, or the equivalent of one 12-ounce case per person per day. We think that those provisions can be changed and probably should be changed to allow for greater purchasing. The second is the question of contract brewing. You may recall your committee has took on the amendment from Senator Sherman under Senate Bill 17, where he has sought to introduce changes that would allow nano brewers and brew pubs to engage in contract brewing. Certainly, we've worked with Senator Sherman on that amendment, so we certainly feel that that is something we can support and get behind. The third and final point that we think we can work with is allowing the intra-state shipment of products. Currently, New Hampshire has RSA 178.27, which is which is direct shipping, which really applies to businesses that are outside of the state of New Hampshire. We do see a number of methods that consumers can get New Hampshire beverages from the industry, whether it's at retail locations or visiting their breweries, etc. But this does appear to be a gap, and we would propose to create a new statute, probably something like 17827B, that would adopt a number of the provisions in the direct shipping statute to allow for intra-state shipments of alcohol by breweries. So we find these three areas are things that we can accomplish fairly quickly, and are happy to work with the committee. And anything else we feel is a bit uncertain, and we would propose to look at that in totality with the wine and liquor industry, where those types of changes are being contemplated within the manufacturing tier in New Hampshire. And I'll be happy to take any questions, sir. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Moore.
Okay, Senator French, I do have one last hand. CJ Haynes looking to speak for a second time.
Keep it short.
All right, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Aidan just addressed one of the concerns I had with direct shipping. It is a large revenue stream that is potential for our brewers. And the other I did want to speak to is in regards to most of the items that are included in the latest amendment. Several of the items are already currently laws within another license type, such as a wine manufacturer license, the nano license. And I just wanted to specify that language was taken directly from those licenses and transferred into this current legislation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator French, that is everyone I have who signed up, and that is all the hands.
Okay, then I will close this hearing on Senate Bill 125 FN. And we've got one more bill before us. It's the omnibus bill 124 FN. What I'm going to do is we're going to take a 220-second break. And then everyone can prepare, stretch their legs. So now we're down to 217 seconds. We'll be back. Feel better?
Have a nice hot cup of coffee now.
Yeah, just put mine on to brew. Did I say 220 seconds or did I say 240? Where's everyone?
I think you said 220.
Okay.
You said 220. You meant
Yeah.
240. Now we're up to 360.
I know. Where is everyone? I'll back now. Come out of recess. And I'd like to open the hearing on Senate Bill 124 FN. And what we're going to do is have all the senators introduce their parts, and then we'll pick it up from one on for the public. So Senator Kavanaugh, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kevin Kavanaugh, Senator from District 16, the towns of Bow, Candia, Dunbarton, Hooksett, and Manchester Wards 1, 2, and 12. I'm the prime sponsor of Senate Bill 124 FN, which is an omnibus bill adopting legislation relative to insurance. Joe, I was just going to speak to my section. I'm going to do that now, or do you want?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to speak to section 1 of SB 124 FN, which seeks to create a single consistent statutory foundation for travel insurance in the state. I was approached by the industry to sponsor Senate Bill 415 last year, which passed out of this committee 5-0 with an amendment agreed to by the industry and the insurance department. It was based on the National Association of Insurance Commissioners model legislation built on the need for states to have a clear regulatory framework for travel insurance. It has passed in 11 states and being considered in many others this year. This section of the bill will benefit consumers by requiring explicit consumer disclosures, prohibit opt-out sales, clarify permissible sales practices, and other applicability to the state's Unfair Trade Practices Act. Additionally, it will empower the Department of Insurance. Currently, regulations for travel insurance are based mostly on basic health insurance law and limited to distinguishing aspects of travel insurance from major medical or other categories of health insurance. The rules were a creative approach to providing guidance, and this bill attempts to build off that work and allow the department to create rules and procedures beyond the current limited scope. Finally, the bill will ensure a fair marketplace by addressing travel insurance elements not in current regulations. Specifically, the bill defines travel retailers, travel administrators, travel protection plans, and sales practices. You will hear additional testimony from the industry on the importance of these provisions. In conclusion, I ask that you support Section 1 of SB 124FN, which would create an efficient, effective regulatory framework for travel insurance by adding clarity to existing laws and regulations for travel insurance industry in a way that benefits consumers, empowers regulators, and ensures a fair marketplace. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Any questions from the committee members? Going once, going twice. Thank you very much, Senator. Eric?
Okay, the prime sponsor of part 2 is Senator D'Alessandro. Senator D'Alessandro, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I've done it. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You're on.
The most honorable Senator French and colleagues. What a distinguished group. I have been listening to you since 9 o'clock this morning.
Oh,
I'm so enthralled with the rhetoric. I'm so excited by the rhetoric that I'm almost breathless to speak before you and introduce my piece of legislation. I've got so much on my plate that you
sound so anxious.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I come before you as the prime sponsor of a portion of Senate Bill 124. My portion relates to domestic insurance company investments. We passed this, for the record, I'm Senator Lou D'Alessandro. I represent District 20, Manchester Wards 3, 4, 10, 11, in the town of Goffstown. This bill came before the Senate last year as Senate Bill 416, and we did pass it. The bill is supported by the Insurance Commission, and I believe that they will speak in support of it. And there are a number of other entities who will speak in support. The New Hampshire Insurance Investment Law, RSA 402:28, lists the various instruments insurance companies, specifically New Hampshire domestic insurance companies, are permitted to make, such as U.S. Treasury bonds, common stocks, limited partnerships, bank deposits, mortgage loans, real estate, options, and future contracts, and so forth. Senate Bill 124 amends that law to add investments called replications to the list of investments an insurance company can make. Currently, over 30 states permit their domestic insurers to invest in replications. And this bill would allow our New Hampshire-based insurance companies to do the same. I'm pleased to introduce this bill at the bequest of the Liberty Mutual Group, which owns 18 New Hampshire-based insurance companies, including Peerless, Safeco, and Ohio Casualty, and which has about 3,500 employees in New Hampshire. Altogether, these companies have assets for investment in the neighborhood of $25 billion. It's important for them to have the capacity to use current investment instruments to effectively access the financial markets. This bill permits domestic insurers to utilize replication transactions in addition to other types of currently authorized derivative transactions, subject to the limits set forth in this bill. A replication transaction is a combination of bond and a derivative that's intended to replicate the performance of an asset that the insurer is permitted to make under the existing laws. Liberty Mutual worked with the insurance department on the language of this bill, and it's my understanding that everyone has a positive feeling about this piece of legislation. Liberty's been a great partner for New Hampshire, and as I said, they have over 3,500 employees in the state of New Hampshire. They've got a large facility in Dover. They've got a large facility in Keene. And when we worked on the insurance tax, Liberty was very helpful in stating that they would retain business interest here in the state of New Hampshire, and they have done that. I'm sure that we'll hear from the insurance commissioner, we'll hear from Liberty, and we'll hear from others. Mr. Chairman, that's my testimony, and I appreciate the opportunity to come before you, even if it's virtual, Harold. It's a thrill, truly.
Well, may I say you did a fine job at introducing that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that.
Any questions from the committee? None, you're off the hook. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
Cameron, part 3.
The prime sponsor of Part 3, Senator Waters.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senator David Waters, District 4, and I'm here to introduce Part 3, which deals with self-storage insurance. This may look familiar to some members of the committee because indeed it was worked on and passed last year in the Senate. Went over to the House, more work was done. A couple of provisions were tweaked and it was ready to go over there. And then of course, COVID stopped the House's operations on the bill. So it is back here, and I will very briefly refresh your memories as to what it does. And there is I believe there'll be testifying members of the industry for if you have more detailed questions for them. So this section offers some definitions. It basically enables self-storage owners to acquire a license for the sale of insurance solely for self-storage. So after some definitions, it defines the licensor. This is only required if you're actually going to sell a product. You do not need this license to provide information, brochures, and other kinds of sources for those who do offer this kind of self-storage insurance. But if you want to sell a plan, it is a limited license for this product only, and for the owner and for the employees of that owner to offer, but for no other insurance products. I think importantly, 4030:3 has the marketing information here. It's basically consumer protection to make sure that the consumer gets information about other coverage, learns that this is not required as a condition of rental, and lays out the terms and rights for the consumer here. The next section talks about essentially the due diligence for the owners under the licensure, that there will be training required, that billing and charging procedures will be made clear to the consumer, and that the licensee understands and is trained in those procedures. Then the final section, again for consumer protection, offers procedures for violations that will be suspension or revocation of this. And finally sets the provisions for a licensing application, and then permits the commissioner to set the license fee under some ceiling limits there. And you'll notice there's a differentiation there, that if you have fewer than 10 facilities in the state, there's a lower maximum fee than if you have more facilities than that. So this is obviously an important product. Some of us have been around long enough to remember when there was a major fire at a self-storage place in Portsmouth, and the insurance, I think a lot of people probably, when that was over, wish they had had an opportunity to buy insurance like this. So, Mr. Chairman, as I said, you'll be able to ask industry about more details on this bill, but I think it's been well honed and ready for you today, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. So I'm just reading here. It's the owner of the facility that will hold the license, not each individual employee, correct?
Yes, exactly. So the license will be held. The employees can offer the product and do the paperwork, but those employees would all have to be trained as well.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you, Senator.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now we'll rush right into part 4.
Part 4 and Senator Sherman.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me?
No, speak up, would you?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Senator Tom Sherman from District 24, 11 towns on the Seacoast, and I am presenting Part 4 of the omnibus, which is relative to Medicare supplemental insurance. And this is yet another bill that was introduced last session and tabled due to COVID. It has two components. The first one is very straightforward. While some insurers recognize that the product that they provided for MedSup in people with disability under the age of 65 was more expensive than when they turned 65. Some insurers gave them the benefit of the doubt, and when they turned 65, they dropped the charges, or they decreased, or at least they notified them that the same product was available at a lower rate. But other insurers did not. And so unwittingly, the policyholder of that MedSup would continue paying the higher rate, even though the exact same policy was available at a lower rate. So what this bill does is it just says that when you turn 65, if you had Medicare MedSup prior and it's available at a lower price, you automatically are dropped to the lower price. So that's part one. Part two is one that actually I met with the Department of Insurance last week, and we discussed part two. It's a little more complex than originally appreciated, but what it basically does is right now, if you have MedSup, you're over 65, you have your policy, and within that same insurer, you wanted to get a better policy, you have to go through underwriting again. So it's going to be significantly more expensive to switch to a different product, not just because the product is more expensive, but because you have to go through underwriting, which means you are likely older, and that age all by itself will increase the price. So what this part of this part of the bill does is it says, as long as you're staying within the same carrier, you don't have to go through medical underwriting again, just to shift to a different policy within that carrier. In understanding the impact of this more, I understand that this could increase, it could have sort of a mixed, if you look at the fiscal note, you'll see what I mean. It could have both an upward and downward impact on policy pricing, and it could drive to some level of consolidation of policies, which might decrease costs. So I believe that that part of the bill, which is F:10, may actually need some work, or maybe something to save for another time after it's had some work. But F:9 is ready to go, and I think it's just a very straightforward, if somebody is entitled to be paying less for the same policy, they should be paying less. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cameron?
Okay, Senator French, though, they're all four parts introduced, and for public testimony, you want to go part by part, correct?
Yeah, so the public, we're going to take them one part at a time. If you are interested in speaking to part one, travel insurance, please raise your hand and Cameron will call on you.
Okay, for part one, we have James Fox. James, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning. My name is James Fox. I'm the Property and Casualty Director at the New Hampshire Insurance Department, and the department is here to speak in favor of the change to the travel insurance law. If you look back in time, I just want to explain it a little bit. It's 402L, which does exist. It's a limited lines license law. About 10 years ago, because of issues that had occurred in the travel insurance, because it was just a limited lines license, and to be clear, those licenses generally are not the full license to sell insurance, so you don't have the continuing education you do with those licenses. and it didn't have much other, let's say, meat on the bone. So we worked with industry to develop our insurance rule 4700, which is very detailed on how travel insurance is supposed to work to protect consumers. And then more recently, the NAIC, so the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, developed a model law for travel insurance. So we worked with industry for quite a while, at least probably maybe 10 of us, on making sure that the NAIC statute and our rule, which we've been operating under for 9 years, would work together well, in essence, to allow the travel industry, insurance industry to operate smoothly. And they're trying to operate, I think, nationally a little more uniformly, and also protect consumers. We think that we've done a pretty good job doing that. So the department is in support of this change to RSA 402L.
Great. Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Fox. Appreciate it.
Okay, the next hand I have raised for part one is Michael Byrne. Michael, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Michael Byrne, and I represent the United States Travel Insurance Association, otherwise known as the USTIA. The USTIA's members include insurance carriers, third-party administrators, insurance agencies, and related businesses involved in the development, administration, and marketing of travel insurance and travel assistance products. We very much appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. Mr. Chairman and Senator Kavanaugh, thank you for sponsoring this bill, Section 1 of Senate Bill 124. And committee members, thank you for considering Section 1 of this legislation, which is important for travel consumers, regulators, and the industry. We very much appreciate the support of the Department of Insurance and the testimony just given, as well as the many years of work and support of the department with respect to the regulation of travel insurance. This legislation is important because it creates a framework specifically for the regulation of travel insurance. Travel insurance is currently subject to the insurance code and regulation, just like any other line of coverage. Section 1 of SB 124 would create travel-specific provisions to provide regulatory certainty where needed, as you just heard. As Senator Kavanaugh mentioned, and as the department mentioned just now, New Hampshire actually started this process a few years ago in 2014. The department adopted innovative travel insurance rules intended as a stopgap solution to this popular discretionary product that, for its legal authority, used to rely on existing laws around health insurance. In 2015, the legislature adopted RSA 402L, which provided licensure provisions and allowed the department to further distinguish aspects of travel insurance from other types of health insurance. Section 1 of SB 124 builds on that work and is intended to establish a distinct, coherent foundation for travel insurance in New Hampshire. As you heard, Section 1 was introduced last year as SB 415, and the industry worked with the department on an amendment which addressed issues about the bill's interaction with the existing rules. That amendment passed out of committee unanimously before being tabled on the floor because of the pandemic. Language in Section 1 of SB 124 is identical to that amendment. Section 1 of SB 124 is based on substantially identical model acts adopted by the National Council of Insurance Legislators and the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. Many of the issues addressed in the legislation are well-established practices accepted by regulators for years, and Section 1 codifies those practices. Going forward, the hope is that there will be no confusion as to what is permitted or not and required under the law. To date, as you heard before, 11 other states have already adopted legislation based on these national model acts, and approximately another 15 states are currently considering such legislation this session, along with New Hampshire. In closing, this legislation is important for clear and transparent regulation of the sale of travel insurance in New Hampshire. It has been thoughtfully drafted by NCOIL and the NAIC with input from stakeholders nationally and in New Hampshire. It will provide legislators and regulators with the authority and information they need for strong regulation, update regulatory requirements and processes to reflect the way the marketplace actually operates today, and most importantly, protect consumers. And we respectfully urge you to adopt the bill. Thank you again for your time today. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do most people who book trips take travel insurance?
Do most people? I'm not sure of the numbers. It's a discretionary for consumers to purchase it in order to book a trip. But it is increasingly popular, and we think and expect that and hope that it'll become even more popular as travel starts to open up again after the pandemic.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that is everyone I have with a hand raised for part one. And there are some folks on the phone. If you press *9, that'll raise your hand. But I don't see anyone else for part one, Senator French.
Great, then we'll move on to part two.
Anyone interested in part two, raise your hand. Let's see, we have James Fox. James, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Again, this is James Fox, the P&C Director at the New Hampshire Insurance Department. And this is another modernization law that's been hopefully be passed. And it was worked on at the department by our Director of Financial Regulation, Doug Bartlett. We've had at least 30 years of experience. And I think basically what we've done is we've taken the original statutory provisions and expanded them to allow, as Senator D'Alessandro said, more derivative transactions. I think that it's done in a very measured way. Director Bartlett used NAIC model language. So I think Director Bartlett spent a lot of time making sure that it balanced the interests of Liberty Mutual and domestic insurance companies, and also with an eye towards consumer protection. So in that sense, the department supports it and thinks it will be beneficial both to the insurance industry and the consumers.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, thanks, Mr. Fox.
Okay, that's the only hand I have raised for part two, but I know I've received email. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I have.
All right. Okay, the next person is Don Baldini. Don, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. So, Chairman French, with your permission, I do have two colleagues with me who could be available for technical questions, and we'll present together in the interest of time, if that is all right.
That would be perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman French and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Don Baldini from Liberty Mutual's Public Affairs Group. And as I said, with me are Helen O'Rourke, General Counsel for the Liberty Investment Group, and Joshua Beiser, Senior Corporate Counsel in the Investments Legal Group. Liberty would like to be recorded in favor of SB 124, Part 2, relative to domestic insurance company investments. We thank Senator D'Alessandro for his sponsorship and for the support of the New Hampshire Insurance Department, who, as James Fox just said, we work closely with to craft the language that is before you today. So again, as a reminder, as Senator D'Alessandro said, this is the same proposal that this committee considered last session and which passed the Senate before COVID-19 pandemic slowed legislative work. This bill will amend the New Hampshire Insurance Company Investment Statute to expressly allow insurers to use an investment option called replication, which is a form of derivative which, as it sounds, allows us to replicate the performance of an asset that we are allowed to own pursuant to the statute, but which is hard to find in the market, or for which the transactional or other costs of acquiring the asset are not economical. So one example, which is presented in the written submission from Ms. O'Rourke, is a bond from a high quality corporate issuer like Johnson & Johnson. If we hold a Johnson & Johnson bond with a floating interest rate, but would prefer a fixed interest rate bond, and if that bond is hard to find in the market or too costly to purchase, we could enter into a contract with a counterparty to exchange the floating rate payments from Johnson & Johnson with fixed interest rate payments from the counterparty, which would be a large A-rated bank like Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan. The ability to replicate the bond we want is cost effective, as it is less costly than selling the floating rate bond and buying the fixed rate bond if it is even available. And it gives us added flexibility to invest in order to better meet our obligations to our customers and to compete in a competitive global insurance market. So 2 important points I'd like to emphasize. The replicated investment must be of a type the New Hampshire statute allows us to invest in, and the replicated investment would be subject to the provisions and conditions of the statute as if it were a direct investment, all overseen by the New Hampshire Insurance Department and disclosed in publicly available filings. So from my example, hopefully I've shown that how state insurance investment statutes govern insurers' ability to invest their assets. But you might be asking why the New Hampshire statute is so important to Liberty Mutual. Liberty Mutual is a large, diversified global property and casualty insurers. In fact, we're the 6th largest P&C insurer in the world, and we rank 77th on the Fortune 100 list of largest U.S. corporations based on 2019 consolidated revenue of about $44 billion. We're headquartered in Boston, and we have 45,000 employees in the 29 or so countries we operate in, but we've long been a significant presence in New Hampshire, as Senator D'Alessandro pointed out, with about 3,500 employees throughout the state, particularly in Dover and Portsmouth. And as Senator D'Alessandro pointed out, we also have about 18 separate underwriting companies which are domiciled in New Hampshire, similar to the way other companies have states of incorporation. And several of those 18 companies have assets under management allocated to them, which represent about 1/3 of Liberty's total assets under management of nearly 90 billion. So approximately $26 to $30 billion of that total is allocated to companies that are domiciled or domesticated in New Hampshire. So the New Hampshire investment statute and what it allows has very significant impact on our ability to manage our assets, and the New Hampshire Insurance Department plays a key role in overseeing all of our operations. Over 30 state investment statutes allow for derivatives, and over 20 expressly or explicitly allow replication, broad replication, which, as I said, New Hampshire statute currently does not permit. So amending New Hampshire statute to expressly allow replication would update it in order to keep pace with other states, and would allow all New Hampshire domestics, not just Liberty Mutual, the ability to utilize this important tool in order to enhance flexibility and competitiveness. So with that, thank you for your consideration. I do have my colleagues available in the event you have some technical questions. If not, we'd be happy to make them available, or we'd be happy to make ourselves available after the hearing if there are any technical questions. But right now, I'll leave it at that and see if there's any questions or concerns.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. We appreciate your consideration.
Okay. The only other hand I have raised for this part is James Fox to speak for a second time.
I'd like to hear from him.
Okay. James, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was, if my hand was raised, it was an accident. I think Mr. Baldini did a great job explaining it, and the insurance department concurs with his statements.
Good, thanks.
Okay, those are all the hands I have for part 2.
Good, let's start part 3.
Okay, anyone wishing to speak on part 3, can you raise your hand either through the Zoom or if you're on the phone by pressing *9. And James Fox.
Hello again, this is James Fox from the New Hampshire Insurance Department. I'm P&C Director, and this is a limited lines license for storage facilities. As I spoke earlier about 402L's original format was a limited lines license for travel insurance. And I think the problem with the original format of 402L for travel was that it was too bare bones and it needed a more detailed rule and now a detailed statute to, let's say, avoid problems. And I think the department's position on this is that the storage facility bill is too bare bones and may cause the same problems that the original travel law had. And so the department at this point feels that it's not in the best interest of consumers to move forward with this part of the omnibus bill. I think it needs more work. And as I said, these limited lines licenses, they're much more you pay a certain amount of money than you're allowed to sell that type of insurance. And when it comes to storage facility insurance, somebody asked earlier how many people purchase travel policies, and they're pretty common, and they're named peril policies. So you have to be careful exactly what you're purchasing it for to make sure you're going to get the coverage, because just not going on the trip's not going to get you the coverage. In this area, it gets even more complicated because now you have really what amounts to the interplay between a homeowner's policy or renter's policy and a storage facility policy. Most homeowners policies and renters policies is going to provide you coverage consistent with the homeowner's provisions for storage. So in that sense, you may not need it and you may only need a gap filler. And those, the interplay between what you would need in a homeowner's policy and a storage facility policy is really something that the department feels at this point is best handled by a full license 402J license holder, because they understand all of the products and it can get complicated, or the insurance company that sold the homeowner's policy, the renter's policy. So at this point in time, the department, and also just backed up by all that, is if you have a 402J licensed producer, they have an E&O policy. So if they make an error, there's another place to look to get coverage. So at this point in time, the department just feels that this particular part of the omnibus bill is not ready for prime time and and therefore opposes it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from Mr. Parks? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Okay, the next hand I have raised is Joe Doherty. Joe, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Cameron. Good morning, Chairman French and members of the committee. My name is Joe Doherty. I work on behalf of the National Self-Storage Association. And I just want to testify briefly in support of this component of the bill. The self-storage insurance bill that we're talking about here has been approved in some form in 39 states, including Vermont, Massachusetts, and New York. It is similar to what's already in place in New Hampshire and many other states relating to cell phone or portable electronics insurance. So in that sense, it is a well-vetted product. It's a product that insurance regulators in other states understand, and we support it in that way. In terms of the need that it satisfies, so approximately 50% of self-storage tenants are in some form of transition and may not have any form of insurance coverage. For those who do have a homeowners or renters policy that may or may not respond to what's stored in a storage unit, there are disclosures given to the consumer that indicate that this coverage may duplicate what they already have in place. And as Senator Waters addressed in his opening testimony, there's also a disclosure that the consumer does not have to purchase this product in order to rent at the self-storage facility. These products are first to respond in the event that there is a conflict between or duplicative coverage between this and another type of coverage. And they are low cost. We're talking maybe in the high single digits to low double digits of cost, and have deductibles that are substantially lower than what are in place for homeowners, typically either a $0 deductible, so no deductible, up to a maximum deductible about $100. So these, in terms of the types of, or the number of consumers that may be interested in this product, about 53,000 households in New Hampshire rent self-storage based on national data of about 10% of households nationally needing self-storage at various times in their lives. Typical rental policy periods are anywhere from a handful of months to about a year. So with all of that in mind, we strongly support this bill and ask for your favorable consideration, just the way this bill passed through this committee last year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Okay, the next hand I have is Rhonda Hallett Pope. Rhonda, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Good morning, Chairman French and committee. I only want to say that the New Hampshire Self-Storage Association is in support of this bill. We feel that it gives us as owners and operators a lot of clarity about what is being offered and how, along with having training available. And we also feel that it is a good protection for our customers. And I agree with everything that Joe has already said previously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, those are all the hands I see. If you want to speak on part 3, please raise your hand. And I'm not seeing anything new, Senator French.
Great, then let's go to part 4.
Okay, if you want to speak on part 4, please raise your hand. Okay, we have Tyler Brannon from the Insurance Department.
Great, bring him in.
Good morning. So Tyler Brennan with the Insurance Department, and I am addressing the sections on Medicare supplemental insurance and dividing my comments between the two. By way of background, Medicare is the federal program for people over 65 and the disabled. What a lot of people don't realize is that about 16% of the people in Medicare are disabled people under 65. So it's not a really small population. It is kind of substantial from a policy point of view. State insurance departments do not regulate the underlying Medicare. We also do not regulate Medicare Advantage products. We have a limited role in managing or regulating Medicare supplemental policies. And as it relates to the policy decisions in the bill, we can't do anything we want as a state, but we do have some flexibility. So the first section, I think Senator Sherman introduced it pretty well. There is some lack of clarity in terms of, I guess, the flexibility for carriers around this. When we surveyed carriers to see how many of them were automatically telling the member that they qualified for that 65 rate, which would be lower than the existing disabled rate they've been paying, we got mixed feedback from the carriers. One carrier said we would never do that, it's clearly illegal. And but other carriers were doing it and continuing to bill those members at the higher rate. So this part of the legislation is pretty clear. It would provide us with the regulatory clarity to provide a good message, a consistent message to the carriers. It would also resolve what we've had in terms of a few consumer complaints on this, people who have come to the department having paid those higher premiums and not being happy about it. The second part of the bill deals with what are essentially kind of rating rules for MedSup. And without going into a lot of detail, there is that open enrollment period when you turn 65, and that is when you're soon to go into a Medicare supplemental policy. Changing policies, changing carriers after that can result in what could be seen as a financial penalty. So we do agree the language is not as robust or as clear as it should be or could be in terms of addressing what could be a significant policy change. So we do support the senator's comments that this should have a little bit more work done on it, perhaps remove it now and deal with the issue as a part of a larger conversation later. So I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Great. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Tyler.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Elizabeth Lively. Elizabeth, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Chairman French and committee members for the opportunity to speak in support of the Medicare supplemental sections included in Senate Bill 124. I am the Eastern Region Advocacy Director of Dialysis Patient Citizens. It's a national nonprofit patient advocacy organization. We work to improve the quality of life for all dialysis patients through education and advocacy. We are patient-led with membership open only to dialysis and kidney disease patients and their families. This legislation is really of significance to the more than 1,700 end-stage renal disease patients in New Hampshire. And I want to comment on the two sections just briefly. Section 415 F9. This legislation closes an important premium cost loophole. On average, under age 65 dialysis patients pay 2 times more than age 65 and often more than what an age 80 enrollee would pay. So requiring issuers to lower the premium rate for these enrollees when they turn 65 is really important to their financial stability. Regarding 415 F10, I've heard the comments that Senator Sherman made on the fiscal note. I just want to point out for all of you that for somebody who is under age 65, they may want to change their plan because they're looking for a lower premium, particularly in light of, they're paying double from what the other enrollees are paying. And if they're looking for an expanded benefit, they will, of course, pay a higher premium for those expanded benefits. So I just wanted to point those two features out. Thank you for the opportunity to testify briefly on this important legislation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Okay, next is Sabrina Dunlap. Sabrina, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Sabrina Dunlap, Director of Government Relations at Anthem. Just wanted to comment briefly on the Medicare piece. We're fine with the first part, but I ran the second part by our Medicare folks, since that is not my area of expertise. And we do have concerns. They called it the birthday rule. And their comment was that if you allow members to switch plans without underwriting in a guaranteed acceptance situation, it ultimately increases premiums at above average rates for the lowest price plans that receive all the switching. So they said it causes quite a bit of disruption. I think they've seen this in 1 or 2 other states. So we would agree that that piece needs some more work. I think there's some changes that could be made to improve it. So we would echo Tyler and Senator Sherman that we think that piece should get a little more work. So that is all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Cameron.
Okay, the last hand I have raised is Heidi Kroll. Heidi, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Are you able to hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning on House Bill SB 124. For the record, my name is Heidi Kroll. I'm with Gallagher, Callahan, and Gartrell, representing AHIP, America's Health Insurance Plans. My remarks are limited this morning to concerns that AHIP has with respect to Part 4 of beginning on page 17, line 36, the proposed new section RSA 415-F:10, titled Change in Coverage. And I would like to point you to the bill's fiscal note, which sums up AHIP's concerns with this section rather succinctly. And the fiscal note reads in part as follows. This ability to change coverage creates anti-selection risk. The risk is that insureds do not have the incentive to buy the coverage they need for the entire coverage period and instead can buy lesser coverage and then buy up when and if their needs change. The department assumes carriers will respond to this requirement in two ways. First, the department assumes premium rates will increase to adjust for this increased risk and or that there will be upward pressure on claims, especially for richer plans. And second, the department assumes that there will be a consolidation in plan offerings and it will be too risky for a carrier to be the only one offering a richer plan. So the points raised in this fiscal note are consistent with AHIP's concerns, namely that this proposal will lead to an increase in premiums and a decrease in the number of Medicare supplemental insurance plans available to New Hampshire residents. And obviously, AHIP does not believe that those outcomes will be good for New Hampshire consumers who are looking for lower premiums and more choices when shopping for Medicare supplemental insurance. So for these reasons, we would agree with the comments that have been made by Senator Sherman and the department and Ms. Dunlap, that it's probably, this piece is not ready for prime time yet. And we'd be happy to work with parties to see if there's a way to improve that piece. And with that, I'd be happy to thank you for the opportunity to testify and be happy to try to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thanks, Ms. Grohl.
Senator French, those are all of the hands that have been raised.
Very good. Then we'll close this hearing on Senate Bill 124 FM. Oh.
Do you want a motion, Senator French?
Yeah, please.
To go into executive session, or do you want a 3-minute break?
I would actually like a 3-minute break so I can figure out what we should be bringing up. So let's take a 3-minute recess and another 2:20, say, and
come back at 11:20.
No, 11:19, please.
All right.
Thanks. I'm back.
That's awesome.
So I would like a motion to go into executive session. I'd like to take up 3 bills.
I'll move that we go into executive session, Mr. Chair.
I'll second.
Motion made by Senator Bradley, seconded by Senator Susie. Senator Bradley,
Why don't we, if we could,
We have to vote.
Senator Bradley, would you vote?
oh. Yeah, I know. Donna always corrects me. It doesn't matter when and where, but thank you very much, Madam.
Someone
President.
has to.
Yeah, someone has to. I move that we go into it and I vote for it.
Thank you. Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Gannon,
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh,
Yes.
and Senator French also says yes. Now we're in it.
You'll learn never to call on me first again.
True. Start off with Susie.
Can, I'll move ought to pass on Senate Bill 124. But I'm also going to propose an amendment.
Okay.
And I think it could be a committee amendment that we do right now, which is to remove at Senator Sherman's suggestion, starting on line 36, page 17, that's section 415F10.
To where?
Well, it would be that whole section, but not the effective date. So it'd be line 36 on page 17 through line 5 on page 18.
Great.
The one thing I would note, and I think that Senator Susie, Senator Kavanaugh, and you, Mr. Chairman, had experience more so than myself last year with the self-storage provision. So somebody else may want to speak to that because the insurance department had a different view on it than the committee
so-
last year.
So I do like the self-storage section personally. We heard it last year. It makes sense to me. It's very convenient. As we heard, a lot of people who use storage, self-storage, are in transition and don't have home coverage. I think it's a good consumer product to be able to, and a good way to address it. So I'm in favor of putting that in.
Mr. Chairman, I pulled up the hearing report from the bill the last time we heard it. And the last time the department was neutral and offered a couple suggestions for amended language, which we did incorporate into amendments. So I don't know what's changed. The department cooperated in making the bill better last time. I think the bill is good the way it is. So I would support it moving forward.
Good. Anyone else? So a motion
My
for the amendment.
is to strike that section. I think we have to vote on that.
Correct. So we have a motion to amend Senate Bill 124 by striking lines 36 on page 17 through lines 5 on page 18.
Okay.
We have a motion by Bradley, a second by Senator Susie.
I think that was for I think Aaron is trying to, we need an ought to pass motion first.
I believe so, correct.
Then amended
There,
motion.
Brad.
I would second Senator Bradley's ought to pass. And then I would also second Senator Bradley's ought to pass on the proposed amendment as he described.
Thank you, Senator. Then all in favor, Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Bradley,
Yes.
Senator Gannon,
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh,
Yes.
and Senator French says yes. 5-0. 5-0.
Senator French, who do you want to take the bill out?
You would like to? Senator Kavanaugh, that's your bill?
I was the lead on, I'll take it.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Given that this has had virtually every section so much scrutiny, I'll move consent calendar for 124.
I'll second.
Bradley's for consent, Kavanaugh second. Senator Bradley,
Aye.
Senator Gannon,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Senator French says yes. So put that on consent. Do I have
This
a
is definitely
motion
one
on,
where the omnibus process works, Senator Susie?
What's that? I'm sorry.
I said this bill is definitely one where the omnibus process worked.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
I would agree.
so,
Oh, wait, Senator
Let's-
French. Sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. I think so. We did the underlying motion of ought to pass, then we passed the amendment. Don't we have to vote on the ought to pass as amended motion?
One more roll call.
One more roll call.
I believe I was just about to do that, Aaron. So, thank you. Do I have a motion?
We
That one. Yeah.
Then we have a motion about to pass. Okay,
ought to pass as
as amended and seconded by Senator Kavanaugh. So, Senator Bradley,
Aye.
Senator Gannon,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh,
Yes.
and Senator French confusedly says yes also. Moving quickly, do I have a motion on Senate Bill 66?
I would move an amendment to Senate Bill 66. And again, this can be a committee amendment because it's fairly simple. As I recall, and maybe others would remember, but when we considered this bill last year, I thought that we had a sunset in it. I would propose that we have a 3-year sunset on this provision that allows, the sales that are incorporated, the transport, the delivery sales for a 3-year period. Then we can have a look back, see if it's working, as opposed to making it permanent.
Senator Bradley, I would agree with a sunset. I personally think 3 years is a little too long. Would you be amenable to making it shorter? I mean, I
Well,
think
it's got to be longer than 240 seconds.
Hey,
I think there's room between 3 years.
I mean, that's Harold's threshold.
my go-to time.
How about
What do
2
you-
years?
That's better.
That way it gets it into assuming it passes, into a new legislature, as opposed to having to bring it back next year, if we think it's a good idea.
Sounds good to me. Do I have an motion on that?
So I would move a sunset clause that it would be repealed. I think it would have to be the wording June 30th, 2024. But OLS knows how to do exactly that. It would sunset in 2 years after the effective date.
Second that.
we do need a motion on
Ought to pass, correct?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought I had already moved that. I'm sorry.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Senator Bradley,
Aye.
Senator Susie,
Wait,
Oh, wait.
we only have a motion on not to pass. We don't have a motion on an amendment yet.
we don't have a motion on so I move to amend it to sunset in 2 years, June 30th, 2024.
Okay.
seconded by Senator Bradley. So we have a motion of ought to pass as amended.
No, Senator French, you need to vote on the motion to amend and insert that sunset clause.
Donna says you're right, so I'll go with that. So we have a motion of ought to pass on the amendment. Correct?
Correct. Made
That's
by,
what we,
yes,
made by French, seconded by Kavanaugh,
Senator Bradley, I think.
Senator Bradley. Senator Bradley,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Gannon,
Yep.
Senator Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Senator French says yes. Now, we have I need a motion of ought to pass as amended.
I'll move on to pass as amended.
We already had an underlying motion for ought to pass as amended.
I think
Because it-
Senator Kavanaugh has another amendment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot that.
Senator Kavanaugh, you have
Yes, I do
another,
have Amendment 0357S. And I know there was concern, the commission and other people didn't get to see it. I just received it today too. It's just, it was a little bit last minute. So the commission has a little issue with it. I'd like to work on it, I guess. And so I guess I will hold on that.
want to bring it to the floor?
No, I'm going to wait to bring it forward, I guess. I'd like to talk to the commission, just because it's just been last minute to get this amendment out. I'd like to talk to them first before I go forward with it.
Okay.
Okay.
And my understanding, if I could ask Senator Kavanaugh a question, that would have allowed not just the sales of liquor, but actually mixed drinks. Is that correct? Okay. I would, I'm not sure I could vote for that today.
Yeah, and I think it is. I think the commission is saying it's a little outside of what the governor's order is. And I'd just like to clean it up. If there's something we could do, I'd just as soon wait instead of jeopardizing the whole bill that it sits now.
Okay, anything else? So we do have a motion of ought to pass as amended. Is that correct, Aaron?
Correct.
So we'll take a roll call vote on that. Senator Bradley,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Gannon,
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh,
Yes.
and Senator French says yes. Do I have a motion for consent?
I'll move that too.
Motion for consent by Bradley, seconded by Kavanaugh. Senator Bradley,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Gannon,
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Senator French says yes. We're
Senator,
down to,
Senator, who do you want to fill out?
I'll take that out.
Okay.
Now, I'd like to take up 63.
So, Mr. Chair, on 63,
Yes,
I'd make a motion that we re-refer that for further study.
Second.
I'd like to speak to that.
So what I would say is, I think I had expressed reservations about, these kind of changes. They could well have some merit, but I think that the testimony in the hearing showed that there's really not an issue thus far in the pandemic about, the kind of lawsuits that would give rise to the concern expressed by the supporters of the bill. That being said, if we re-refer it, we'll have, hopefully the pandemic will be waning. The need for it will have gone with the waning of the pandemic, and we'll have a chance to, just double check, if you will, that those things happen and that hopefully there won't be a need for it at that point in time.
Thank you. So we have a motion on Senate Bill 63 to refer to committee by Bradley, seconded by Senator Gannon. Anyone else like to speak to it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would just say I don't see any need for this legislation. I think unfortunately some people have been misled as to how cases are brought in the state of New Hampshire, but I will vote to re-refer to keep it open and to perhaps dispose of it at a later time when we see for certain that it isn't necessary.
Great. So Senator Bradley,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Senator Gannon,
Yes.
Senator French says yes. Motion for consent,
So moved.
Second.
consent by Senator Susie, seconded by Senator Bradley. Senator Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Senator Gannon,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Bradley,
Yes.
Senator French says yes. We'll put that on consent.
I'm happy to take that one out.
Thank you, Senator. Well, we don't have any other business today.
I will move that we come out of exec session.
Second?
We have a motion to come out of exec session by Bradley, seconded by Kavanaugh. Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Gannon,
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Senator Bradley,
Yes.
Senator French says yes. I think that wraps it up for today.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second?
Motion to adjourn by Bradley, seconded by Susie. Senator Bradley,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Senator Gannon,
Yes.
and Senator French says yes. Until next week.
The next.
Okay, everyone.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2
2
weeks.
weeks. Nice.
Hey, thank you all very much for keeping me straight and guiding me through the perils of chairmanship.
Good job,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
You're in an hour, Harold.